Minecraft is full of hidden details. Who are the Wardens? Was there ever any water in the Nether? And why won't Jeb answer my emails? Let's explore. Did you know that by typing Excited Z into the search bar of your recipe book, then your in-game language automatically gets changed to Pirate Speak, which is a pirate-themed take on English where the swords become cutlasses, and this, the skeleton horse spawn egg, called a bag of bones Brumby cackle fruit, which is an Easter egg hinted to an ex-Mojang developer, Maria Lamont, whose Minecraft username is expectedly Excited Z. And obviously this is clearly an intended way to play Minecraft. Everyone has seen the messages in the Minecraft title screen, but I think it's hiding something. Now in this you can find shoutouts to Terraria, positive affirmations, and even the player's username, and you can find all those messages inside the splashes.txt file in your game's code. However, there's one text that's a little more mysterious. Now that entry reads, "This message will never appear on the splash screen." Isn't that weird? And it's true, that message never appears, despite being put on the list. The only exception is in Legacy Console Edition, and if you were to delete the splashes.txt file entirely, then the only message that your title screen reads out is missing no. I promise this isn't a horror video, but added all the way back in Minecraft 1.9, we got Cave Sound 14. And cave sounds are those spooky ambient noises that you hear while you're exploring the depths. And that single sound alone is the entire reason for inspiring horror mods like the Cave Dweller. But if we were to take that Cave Sound 14 and put it into a spectrogram, it actually displays the distorted face of a creeper. And that's why I don't go underground. There are actually over 1,000 hats that are coded inside of Minecraft, and this is due to the /item command. See, by doing /item replace, you can put any item in the game into your head armor slot. Now, not all of them are winners. Like a pufferfish on your face probably isn't the prettiest, but certain items have little details coded to make them more interesting. Like for example, feathers or leads. The feathers will poke straight out of the back of your head, and while the lead will position onto the front of your face looking more like a monocle. Though if you want to look like a proper dapper gentleman, there's really only one option. Some fox noises are actually the same sound despite sounding different. See, Minecraft foxes will occasionally screech at night if there's no trusted players around, and there are 3 types of these screeches. But what most people don't know is that the first and the third screeches are actually the same sound, but inverted. The first is the third sound but reversed in higher pitch, and the third is the first sound but reversed in lower pitch. And as for why, I guess Mojang just really liked that sound. Or more specifically, they probably liked not having to record a third sound when they could just use this one. Have you ever wanted to visit the Upside Down? Well, you can. But you can come close by viewing the world through the eyes of the Enderman. Try entering spectator mode and possessing one of our long-legged friends. You'll see that the world's color gets inverted by a negative filter. And by visiting the end dimension, we can even see that Endstone starts to look like a blue variant of cobblestone, which kind of make it seem like Endermen see the end as if it's the overworld. Have you ever wondered what it would look like to be an item frame? Well, but now you can, because if you try possessing one in spectator mode, it actually works. And that's because the item frame is an entity that we can possess like all other mobs. And it's not just item frames that we can possess. Paintings, armor stands, all of them can be subject to our prying eyes. Now in fairness, I'd rather look at a painting instead of look through the eyes of a painting. The rest of the gallery is not so pretty. There are a couple of clues that might imply there used to be water inside of the Nether. See, with the basalt that was added in 1.16, we now know that basalt forms when lava is cooled next to blue ice, which was added as a way to make the basalt block renewable. But it could also mean that ice or water used to cover what we now know as the basalt deltas. So something definitely cooled down Nether's lava, and it certainly wasn't more lava. But that's just a nah, it doesn't feel right unless it's MatPat saying it. There's a cool detail found inside the igloos. Now you might have noticed that the windows in igloos being made of ice, and ice melts at light levels higher than 11. So the redstone torch inside actually wouldn't do anything. But if we were to move in and turn on the furnace, then that ice would melt and the water would sweep away the carpet, revealing the secret trapdoor leading underground, meaning that if you didn't know the secret, there would actually still be a natural way of discovering it. Mojang has already shown a love for painting through Christopher Zetterstrand, but they've also implemented something called the Mona Lisa effect, which is that strange creepy illusion where paintings will appear to follow you with their eyes, and they've referenced this with the Elder Guardian and its head model. Now, most mobs will turn their head to look at the player, but the Elder Guardian's head is actually just its eyeball, and weirder still is that if you summon one with the no AI, we can see that even then the Guardian will still follow you with its stare. I swear, this wasn't supposed to be a horror video. Wardens aren't as scary as you think, or maybe they're even scarier, since if you invert the colors of a warden, it starts to look like a pink axolotl, and you'll find that its horns strike an uncanny resemblance to an axolotl's frills. But we can dig even deeper. See, the launch's release notes showed one very cryptic message, which if you translate that, comes into text to be, axolotls are not what they seem. So either the wardens are morbid experiments created from axolotls, axolotls, or the axolotls are the evil masterminds planning to destroy the overworld. And that has to be the only two options, no substitutes. Picture this, you ever know someone who has a beard but then they suddenly shave? Well, the Minecraft witches are kinda like that. Now, while witches and other illager mobs usually have their face covered, there's a brief moment where you can actually see the witch's mouth, and it's a bit unsettling. So the next time that a witch drinks a potion in front of you, try to view it from the side. There's a small 2-pixel mouth that's visible. Ancient debris might be related to shulkers. Now, we don't see it often, but the bottom of a shulker has a spiral, and that's the very same spiral that sits at the bottom of ancient debris, which could be a hint that at some point in time, the shulkers visited or even inhabited the nether dimension, and now their fossils sit at the bottom of the fiery depths, pressurized into Minecraft's hardest metal. It'd be easy to believe that as long as you don't look at this tweet. Get it off screen. See, it's so much easier to believe the theory when it's back on screen again. Okay, thanks. I know it's hard to believe, but there's some things that the Minecraft movie's getting right, which is that the creeper isn't a reptile or an undead or anything in between, but actually both Notch and Ditterbone have made statements relating to creepers being plants. And in another tweet, Notch said, "I imagine them as being made out of leaves or similar, and I'm not sure why they explode." So that strange bushy-like creature that sneaks up on Jason Momoa might be the closest thing we have to the realistic depiction. The dead bushes that you find across Minecraft might actually be a clue. Now, when you look at a dead bush next to an azalea plant, they seem to bear a striking resemblance, especially when the dead bush is in a pot. At that point, the two plants have a practically identical texture, which could imply that dead bushes are actually decayed azalea bushes, showing us where the lush biomes might have once thrived. That or Mojang just likes to recycle when they can. I like the first option better. Wandering traders and nitwits are the Minecraft community's favorite mobs to kill. However, the reason people love them so much might be closer than you think. See, the nitwit, of course, has this green tunic, and then if we bring the trader next to a nitwit, we can see the similarities. They both seem to be wearing the same green shirt, and the wandering trader is covering up its face, giving us an underlying story that the wandering trader might be a nitwit that left the village and was forced to roam the overworld in search of a purpose. Now, if only the phantoms had an actual cool, useful cousin. Iron golems are a little bit misleading. Now, most people associate them with poppies, or historically roses, but upon closer inspection, the plant texture that we see in the iron golem doesn't resemble either. If anything, it's closer to the appearance of the vines found in glowberries, a plant that was added nearly 10 years after the iron golem. Does it mean anything in particular? Does Jeb answer my emails? Case closed. Piglin bartering is an extremely powerful tool in Minecraft progression, but on the lore side, you might be wondering how exactly they got their hands on string. Well, that's part of the reason they added the striders. See, the strider has string-like hair, and upon death, they'll drop that as the string item. So every crossbow is implied to be crafted from piglins playing barber. So every crossbow that you find inside of the nether, it was actually made from the shoestrings that you'll find on these futons. Piglins aren't actually the only intelligent life that you can find in the nether. According to a Mojang article back in 2019, it was called to attention that blazes are sentient beings made out of lava, which would put them in a similar category to illagers or endermen. And the article goes on to say it's theorized by scholars that the blazes were created as guards by the original inhabitants of the fortresses. And if that's true, maybe the same can be said for the breezes. Bedrock ghasts are actually different from Java ghasts, which when you knock a ghast fireball back at it, you could just barely make out a difference in the hurt animation's color. Java, like with all its mobs, displays a red tint when the ghast gets hurt, but the Bedrock's ghast turns orange, which only happens when it's killed by a returned fireball. If you've ever killed a slime or magma cube, unfortunately they remember what you did to them, or at least their children will. See, if you name a slime or a magma cube with a name tag, their custom name will be passed down to all the children, and this will happen regardless of the size, and no matter how many times you break them down. The only exception being that it appears to stop when they become items. God, how morbid would that be if we just had the names of dead mobs in our inventories? Horses can eat several foods, but why golden carrots or apples? Well, this is in reference to the mythological creatures, like the horse Arion of Greek myth or Jeff Bezos of New Mexico. These fictional beasts were known for their great speed, and in some depictions, sated their hunger with golden food. So the next time that you ride your Minecraft horse, remember the majestic, long mane origins that it came from, and expensive ones at that. Wolves are definitely just dogs, but Mojang keeps trying to convince us that they're not, because according to the Minecraft wiki, tamed wolves will chase bats around, despite never being able to actually catch them. Slimes can become much bigger than you think, and while the biggest that we'll naturally see spawning is a size 3 slime, those are already pretty deadly, but with commands, we can make that size up to 126. Though once you get up to size 8, the slimes are already big enough that it's impossible to outrun one on flat ground. So make sure to thank your slime overlords so that they'll be merciful, lest one day they take over the world with the axolotls. Minecraft mobs actually have the traits of both male and female sexes. For example, all the chicken can lay eggs, and all farm animals can be bred. And in the real world, this makes Minecraft animals more similar to that of tapeworms or snails, meaning that your favorite pet wolf might actually be a barnacle in disguise. On Java Edition, you might have noticed that your trident feels more like a plastic spork when you're going against a drowned. Even with the impaling enchantment, tridents won't increase their damage against these barnacle-infested guys. And that's because drowned actually classify as undead mobs in that category, instead of the aquatic mobs that the Impaling enchantment does more to. And so the best way to do increased damage against the drowned is with the Smite enchantment, which unfortunately can't be put into a trident. Most Minecraft players know about the Jeb sheep, a name tag Easter egg where if you name a sheep after Minecraft's lead designer, it becomes something you might not want to look at if you have photosensitivity. But what's lesser known is the other Easter egg surrounding Minecraft's second favorite redhead, Alex. When Alex was added back in 1.8, the texture had an invisible layer in the shape of glasses, and this is likely in reference to Jeb himself, and how he wants the players to know that he's always watching. Did you know Mojang have gone on record with the names of both the Ender Dragon and the Wither? Yeah, Minecraft lore is hidden everywhere, and during an Ask Mojang, Quinn Richter, the head of the Minecraft marketplace, said the name of the Ender Dragon was Gene. He then, very seriously might I add, stated the Wither's name as Simmons. And while I wanted to ask why Mojang's bosses were named after a British actress from the 1950s, Jeb still won't answer my emails. During the development stages of Minecraft, the axe looked a little different, since back in Minecraft in dev, the axe's texture was double-sided like a battle axe, which seems pretty impractical when you're just trying to cut down a tree that's right in front of you, which is probably why the texture was changed just a few days later, and then changed again so that it faced the other way that we're now familiar with. Nowadays, we're all familiar with the concept of an MLG water bucket save, but back in the day, it wasn't as popular, and for good reason. See, in the past, you'd need a puddle that was 2 blocks deep to stop any kind of fall damage, and it wasn't until after 1.4.4 that we could finally do this with 1 bucket. If you can get your hands on a Totem of Undying, it's an invaluable resource to have, but it does mean we give up an offhand slot to make it work. Though, for what it's worth, the 3DS version of Minecraft lets the totem work in any of the hotbar slots, since there's no offhand feature in that version, which is nice, but I'd rather stick to PC. If you've ever built a snow golem in Minecraft, you might have Amazon to thank for their inclusion. Let me explain. In this tweet back in September of 2011, Notch explained that because of problems with the Amazon Web Services, or AWS, he got frustrated enough to make the snow mob. And now you can buy snow golem merch on Amazon, so I guess it comes full circle. Arrows haven't just gotten cheaper, they've also gotten slower. Since back in beta 1.8, it was possible that if you held down the right click with a bow in your hand, you could actually spam fire out arrows like this. Which I'm not gonna lie, that is pretty satisfying, but I can definitely see why this changed. And it's funny to think that crossbows were the one that got the quick charge enchantment when it seems like our bows were quick charging just fine on their own before the enchantment was added. Nowadays, we all know this guy is Steve. And while that's an iconic enough name to get him into Smash Bros, it turns out the player didn't always have that moniker. In fact, it wasn't until his first guest appearance in the indie game Super Meat Boy that he was finally called Steve. And by all accounts prior, he was just a nameless figure. If by some way you were to get water inside of the Nether Dimension in Bedrock Edition, then because of the way the biomes are coded, the water will actually turn red in color. Which is weird that they would have such a difference between Bedrock and Java in this way, but since it's not an intentional feature to have water in the Nether anyway, I'm really just amazed that they went through the effort of changing the color in the first place. Did you know pigs could drop brown mushrooms? Sure enough, back in the Java Edition survival test, there was a time where these mobs only dropped brown mushrooms on death. But obviously, this was changed to a pork chop when that item got added in. Though it makes me wonder, if you eat a mushroom stew made out of pig shrooms, is that still vegetarian? I don't know. If you've watched a couple of speedruns, you've probably heard the term damage boosting. That is, using the force of knockback to push us into prime locations. And in Minecraft, that works just the same. Since taking damage pushes our player slightly, we can time that with a jump to make something of a super leap. And that's best displayed with a fall damage. As this user shows, we can use the power of pain from this situation to launch ourselves up a couple of blocks. And essentially, this makes any block in the game bouncy, to some degree. So I wouldn't recommend trying this more than once at a time. It might be too much for your life bar. This feature was added to Minecraft, but it was never supposed to be added to Minecraft. Let me explain. Since while working on the Christmas and New Year update for Minecraft, Dinnerbone snuck in the texture for these skis. But the truth was that there was never supposed to be any kind of ski item added to Minecraft. The whole reason it was just added into the files is a red herring for any players that checked. Which I guess does work. I mean, they can't leak the features if the features aren't even in the game. But partnered with the Christmas textures for chests and the like, you can see how people got confused. I'm gonna come out and say it, silverfish are a real pain. Bold statement, I know. So if you're like me and you're trying to avoid being ambushed yet again while finding the end portal, then a Silk Touch tool is a good pick to have. See, if you have a tool enchanted with Silk Touch that isn't a pickaxe, then we can use that as a dowsing machine to see where any potential infested blocks happen to be. And hey, it'll even let us pick them up for later use, whatever you choose that to be. And while I shouldn't directly advocate for it, I do think it'd make for quite the prank, just saying. This official Minecraft skin was lost to time, but back when Mojang first put out the original Minecraft trailer, there did exist this different variant of Steve that never got used, which is definitely a look. But with all the new Minecraft skins that they added into the launcher, I'm still amazed this one's never seen the light of day. Although I guess it did show up in a trailer that was seen by over 100 million people, so that's not exactly underground. According to Notch, torches were supposed to burn out after a while, but this never made it into the official
official game. However, if you play the Java Edition 2.0 snapshot, they do just that. And you'll even need a flint and steel just to reignite them once they burn out, which is annoying, so let's just hope this stays as an April Fool's joke. It turns out, piglins are the reason that there's no more netherite ore in the game, only the ancient debris that we're left with. At least, that's according to this official Minecraft article for 1.16. In this, it says that pure netherite ore no longer exists, since the piglins mined it all out of the nether. Which begs the question, why would they switch from netherite to gold tools? So clearly they're not that smart.
This fox is too small for its own good, and that becomes immediately apparent when you put it in water. It'll start drowning. And you can notice this when a baby fox tries to hunt a fish. It'll likely die before it even gets to the food. Parrots don't just imitate the sounds of other mobs, they also imitate their path. And that'd be why a horde of parrots will follow other mobs around when they see them in the wild. And they'll even target individual mobs, so that where the mob goes, they follow. Which I guess, given the fact that the monkey lost the China exclusive mob vote, is basically the closest that we have to monkey see, monkey do. And hey, parrots are also in the jungle, so I guess that fits.
If you get a mob to stand on top of a cake, it'll just keep rotating in place, completely unable to move. And this is due to a pathfinding oversight in their AI code, which is why the same thing happens on fences as well. If you're tired of placing pumpkins, then don't worry, dispensers will do it for you. The reason this works is based off a snow golem trick. But instead of having the pumpkin set up on top of 2 snow blocks, you have those 2 snow blocks a little further off where it actually can't build a golem. There are plenty of different directions and configurations where this can work, but as soon as you find one, then it's entirely possible to get your pumpkins placed without having to do the right clicking yourself. Is there any point to it? Not that I can think of. And honestly, it's probably a smarter option to have this do the intended method of actually having auto golems built. Why do piglin brutes have 50 HP compared to the regular piglin's 16? Well, according to the lead artist Jasper, that's because their golden arm guard serves as protection, which is the first ever case of golden armor actually being effective. Oftentimes, an animator's work goes underappreciated, since if they did their job right, you shouldn't be able to notice it much. It should just fit right in. But today, I'd like to give a little spotlight to an animation you might not have noticed. And luckily, our subjects for that are these adorable sleeping foxes. See, if we move in for a closer look, you'll notice that these snooze and somethings actually have a subtle breathing animation. Is it a big detail? Not at all. But I do think it's nice to recognize the little tidbits that the developers added in. And as far as that goes, this is right up there in my mind with the sea lantern's glowing animation. It doesn't take a lot of redstone know-how to understand a pressure plate, but while we're all familiar with these, this might catch you off guard. See, while it is true that both mobs and items can weigh down these things, an item frame is a rare sight. Though, surely enough, if you place one like so, we can overlap the hitboxes and effectively create a permanent switch on like so. And what's cool about that is that it opens up the door for a nearly invisible redstone signal. And that's what I'd highly recommend for keeping your redstone lamps lit on the lamppost. I mean, it certainly looks a lot better than a lever, that's for certain. If you don't yet have the mending enchantment, you'll want to pay attention to this. Because when you take those non-enchanted items and mix them together like this, it's not just the 2 durabilities that add up, but rather that repaired item will have the sum of the 2 items' durability plus an additional bonus of 5%. And hey, you did all of that without consuming any XP, which I again think is pretty useful. So if you're getting a lot of armor drops from your mob farm, this could be a good way to bring them back up to usefulness. Since even if these 2 items wouldn't add up to a full durability item, with that 5% repair bonus, it goes right up to clean and pristine, all of which without ever having to touch an anvil. Baby chickens are really small, but they aren't coded like they are. See, even though these mobs are less than a half a block in size, they still will walk through half-block tall spaces, meaning you don't have to worry about any of these mobs escaping through this slab, even if it doesn't make much sense. Finding Minecraft details can be a tricky process, and sometimes the real secrets don't come from the game itself. For instance, take the Iron Golem. Now, in-game, I always figured this red pixel functioned as the pupil, but no, all it takes is one look at the official 2019 Valentine's Day post from Mojang's Instagram to see that the red part is actually the Golem sclera. So does that mean that this is canon? Well, I guess I don't know. After all, there was the famous Bluestone incident from the Village and Pillage trailer, so maybe promotional art isn't always to be trusted. But if I had to bet on my assumption versus the artist's rendition, I'd pick the official every time.
Ever wondered how much damage you deal to a mob? Well, surely some of you must, because there's so many mods out there that exist to show you a mob's health bar. But really, you can see this within the game as well, because when you attack a mob and they display the heart particles, if you actually took the time to count those, you notice that they're not just for show. They actually display the exact amount of damage that you dealt to the mob. Now granted, they show up pretty quick and they sometimes overlap, but sure enough, if you deal 5 hearts of damage, you're gonna see 5 hearts pop up above that mob's head, which is a pretty cool effect, but even knowing this, I doubt I'm ever gonna take the time to count it. I'll know how much damage I've dealt to a mob when they die. If it's not enough to kill them, then it's not enough for me.
Minecraft has its share of odd collisions, and while we've talked about this in the past with minecarts and such, a stranger example might come in the form of signs. Now, from the front, there doesn't seem to be much of a problem here, especially when you place it on the floor. But if we get a side view of this one placed on the wall, then we can actually see how the sign floats off of the block, which is odd, but at least the other 99% of the time, we can barely even notice this. The Pillager mob definitely has a problem with anger management, but if you're trying to impress your friends as the master pacifist, then you should know that it's actually possible to take one of these monsters and bring it over to the good side. You see, just as crossbows work for us, they can actually have their crossbows break. Meaning that if you bait them out of enough shots, they'll eventually be left with no weapon in sight. And at that point, they might still seem a little grumpy, but sure enough, they're pacified. And while I wouldn't feel comfortable reuniting them with society just yet, with progress like this, it's definitely a step in the right direction. There is no limit to the amount of bats that can hang from a single block, which sounds unimportant, but when you execute it like this, it becomes quickly noticeable. And it can make for a pretty serious prank to surprise your friends down in the caves. Though, since it's impossible to tie bats to a lead, I don't know how you'd get all of them together to do this without a spawn egg. The carpets in Minecraft leave a lot to be desired. I mean, when you look at them, they're all one single color. It can kind of get old quick. So if you're trying to find a better rug for your house, then actually putting together maps and item frames is a pretty cool thing to walk on. For one, it gives you a lot more of a design to work with, especially since with this you can add so many minute details that are just not possible with the standard variant. But really, what we're going for here is the illusion. If you ask me, it sells it pretty well, and it'll definitely impress some of your guests when they walk through and see that brand new welcome mat right on the floor for them. Even though magma cubes are made of, well, magma, they can swim in water just fine. And in fact, they're the only mob that you'll find in the Nether that can swim normally. Now, when you see a hostile mob spawn in a village, you're probably not paying much attention to your villagers. I mean, after all, you want to deal with the threat. However, if you take a close look, you can actually notice that when villagers are nervous, they'll begin sweating and emit water particles above their head, which I think is a really cute detail. If anything, it's just a smart way to reuse this particle effect in a different way. But it might be hard to get a villager stuck in one place long enough to see this, because also when villagers get scared of a zombie, they'll start running even faster than the player can at max speed. Yeah, they get a little scared and that's all the inspiration they need. It's never worked for me. I get scared in a chase scene, I'm lying down dead. I'd rather go out in peace. If you were to fish up an item with a fishing rod, it normally flies up to you. But it turns out that if you step to the side, the item's still flying, and in fact it'll just completely pass you by. Which I guess makes sense, but it's still a funny sight to see from this angle. And at this point, would it be fly fishing or fish flying? I have no clue. The Ender Dragon wasn't supposed to be the only dragon in Minecraft. And in fact, there used to be an idea for a red dragon as well. As Notch said, this mob would have been slightly less dangerous than the Ender Dragon, and that they would have spawned in the overworld instead. And hey, even Jeb and Dinnerbone have mentioned wanting to add the mob at some point, so it's definitely been considered, but it doesn't seem like it's coming anytime soon, if at all. If you're playing in normal difficulty and you sit inactive within a minecart, then no matter how long you sit there, your hunger bar will never deplete, which essentially gives you a way to never starve to death, but it's pretty boring, so I'd rather just go get some food and go about it that way. Here's how to make your spyglass even better. Since the way that the spyglass works, it actually modifies your existing FOV. So while we could use our regular FOV and have it zoom in this much, if we lower that FOV to the bottom at 30, then you'll notice when we use the spyglass, it zooms in even closer. And then if you got an additional zoom mod on top of that, you can really use this trick to get up close and personal, and then immediately switch off the lower FOV, because playing the rest of the game this way is miserable. The piercing enchantment could be a lot more useful than you think it is, since if you get this on your weapon, then it actually gives you a way to save back on your arrows. Since, as you can notice here, if we shoot a projectile into a wall without the piercing enchantment, we're not able to pick it back up. But with the piercing enchantment, then it actually works, giving us an economical enchantment that I'm happy to see. Truth be told, villagers do not seem like the smartest mobs, and more often than not, I'm racking my brain trying to figure out their logic. But occasionally, they have their moments. For a case study, take a look at this unemployed villager. Not too impressive, right? But add any workstation within a distance of 32 blocks, and they'll start some serious pathfinding. No joke, these NPCs can even work through mazes to try and find a job, which I'll admit is serious dedication. But why that same villager refuses to restock when the block is right next door, that I'll never understand. Stop using a sword to try and break cobwebs, because instead, it's possible to break these even faster by using a water bucket. So next time that you're stuck down in the spider's domain, it'd be better to pour out some flowing water instead of wasting any durability on your diamond sword. The water's also a lot more reusable, so I doubt there's any objections. Minecraft's villagers used to look like this. See, back in 2010, a player suggested adding in pigmen as NPCs into the game, and for a time, these were the things that were planned to live in the villages, instead of the Squidwards that we all know today. But even though that got shelved, the idea of a zombie pigman did make it into the game, and so we got these instead. Though even those mobs were removed to make room for zombified piglins instead. So it seems like Mojang can never quite decide what to do with them, which is a shame since the idea was that you could even hire these pigmen as bodyguards, which is something Mojang even refuses to do for villagers. Never buy this from a villager, because even though the Woodland Mansion Explorer map might sound like a useful item to get, it could be a ripoff, since as a result of the world generation, there could be times that you buy
provide this map for the cartographer, but the Explorer map doesn't actually show where the structure does exist, but rather where it would have existed if the generation didn't mess up. And really, it's not that useful to get a map that tells me where a woodland mansion would have been when I was really hoping to find where one actually is. I think I'd rather just use my eyes for this.
If you take the time to study a soul sand block, you'll notice that it's not a full block. Rather, it's just a hair short of being a full block size. And while most of the time that's imperceptible, when you use a minecart, it gets immediately noticeable. The reason being is that if you partner these two concepts together, you'll notice that it's possible to phase through solid ground. What happens is that if you have a rail placed beneath a soul sand and then a minecart rolls on top of the stack, the cart will snap down to the rail below and phase you through the soul sand. So if you want to add this to your roller coasters, I guess why not? Do not underestimate tipped arrows, because silly as it may seem, we only need to shoot ourselves with one of these to go sky high. As this user shows off, if we were to give ourselves the slow falling potion effect and then use a Riptide Trident, then we'll be able to keep that same speed going right up in a 45-degree angle. And from there, forget about using rockets for your elytra, we're already well into takeoff. And as pointed out in this comment, the reason that we use arrows in the first place is that the 11-second duration of the effect makes sure that it's only going to be active on the way up, because otherwise we'd just be kind of slow falling through the air with our elytra, which is a little disappointing when you get that much speed on the way up.
While you're down in those trial chambers, you should remember to bring yourself an axe. And not just for fighting mobs, because actually a sword would be better for the PvE with the sweeping edge. And the reason is that if you bring down an axe, you're able to use that to strip off the oxidation off the copper bulbs down there and get extra light inside of the trial chambers. Even if it's a cheap axe, it's gonna do the job in both cases.
This supposed useless feature is actually anything but that, because as Crafter Dark and Weefies point out, if you were to toggle on the touchscreen mode option, then it's possible to put some of your items into the crafting 2x2 grid and have them stay there after you close the inventory. And boom, there you go. Now you've got 4 extra slots to your inventory at no extra cost, making this essentially the cheapest shulker box that you could ask for. And the best part, you don't even have to play Minecraft with a touchscreen to do this. Though I will warn this was patched out in recent updates. But if you're playing on older versions, I don't see why you wouldn't take advantage of this. What did this llama and this boat have in common? Well, if a player rides on top, neither of them will sink, even if you're in water that's deeper than 2 blocks. Which seems small, but the same can't be said for our horses or pigs, so it's definitely noticeable. And that'll make it all the easier to bring your friends along on the caravan for the next time that you travel.
With the new armadillos that spawned from the Armored Paws update, we've now got a new terror for our spiders. And as many technical Minecraft players have been quick to point out, as long as we make sure that the armadillos aren't getting rolled up, then they'll be able to scare the spiders off the walls of your mob farm. Which, as anyone who's ever had to build one of these mob farms know, is a real jamming point. And so while it might be hard to get an armadillo over there in the first place, it turns out that having a few of these will just make it a lot easier for your farm's returns. As you'll see, we don't just have to use the wind charges for jumping, but also while we're flying. And so if you start flying close to the ground with your elytra, look straight down, right click, and then if you look back up in one quick motion, all of that wind charge will turn into a hefty boost off the ground. Just make sure your sensitivity is good enough for able to look up as quick as you're looking down. Since while it is true that the closer to the ground that you get, the better the effect is going to be, it's also true that if you get too close to the ground, it's not going to do you anything. You're just going to be a pile of items and a waste of a wind charge.
Minecraft is a masterclass for reusing textures. Take the endstone for example. It's actually just an inversion, geometric translation, and then a color shift of the cobblestone texture, which is surprising, but the same principle applies to the diamond sword. As you'll soon notice, all we need to do is drop the saturation, and this iconic weapon starts to look a lot more like a familiar tool. Sure enough, a desaturated diamond sword mirrors the iron sword texture, if you minus the handle of course. But I should clarify, it's a bit misleading, because sure, you could get this to happen by desaturating the sword, but since the iron ones predate the diamond variant, it's more likely that the diamond came from recoloring the iron instead of the other way around. When you're on multiplayer, it's nice to offer some starting gear to the new players, but how do you guarantee that that stuff only goes to those who need it, instead of the rich players who are looking for free handouts? Well, odd as it may seem, this book could do the trick. As Razeworks demonstrates, having a book written like so can overload the data and cause a player with too many items in their inventory to get kicked out when they open up the chest. But if you have nothing, it works as planned. And though I barely understand the science behind it, it is a cool system. From afar, this might look confusing, but up close, you'll notice that this mess of white lines is actually an iron golem. See, when an iron golem cracks as its health goes down, those cracks show up when it's got the glowing effect, giving you even more of a reminder to toss in an iron ingot to heal it up. What do you think think of when you see a wandering trader? Well, if you're anything like me, you see this as a free source of leads and leather. But that's only part of the story, since when we take the llamas away from their trader companion, we can actually breed them for some special results. No joke, all it takes is breeding the special llamas and you'll get an offspring with their same unique design, which is a pretty cool souvenir to have. So while it might still be more valuable to pocket the leads, this could be a way to dress up your next caravan, if that's something you're interested in.
Nowadays, we're used to getting Minecraft snapshots on Wednesdays, but in the past, Friday was actually more associated with updates. And that's because in the early days of Minecraft, the game's creator Notch would release secret updates on Fridays, calling it Secret Update Fridays. And some notable features that were added in this way were the minecart and rails, dungeons and spawners, redstone as an entire concept, boats, sugarcane, chickens, jukeboxes, spider jockeys, crouching, paintings, fishing rod. There was quite a bit that was an early alpha that came from this way. And I'll be honest, I kinda loved the idea of doing this, but it was later discontinued for the Halloween update. And really, the last thing that was ever said on the topic was, I liked the Friday updates, but Saturday fixes suck. And that much I have to agree with.
Getting the full effect from a splash potion more often than not seems like a fantasy and not so much a reality. But as it turns out, to bring this promise into the present, all you have to do is look straight up and land a splash potion square on your noggin. By doing that, you hit the sweet spot right on your character's hitbox, and that'll help you sport the splash potion effect as advertised. Better yet, it also works with dispensers, meaning you can set up the proper potion systems to give you the full effect each time, which will have your friends wondering why your speed system works so much better than theirs. Unless you're a rabbit, foxes in Minecraft seem pretty adorable, but that's only because you haven't seen them at full force yet. Sure enough, it's entirely possible for the fox to hold a sword in its mouth and completely use it. And while this not only makes for a really solid Zacian cosplay, it can also be really beneficial because you can use the fox with a fire aspect sword to make cooked chicken farms. Truly, you can't judge a book by its cover, so if you see one of these holding a sword, you might want to back away, or at the very least, keep your chickens in the coop. What's the most fuel you can put in a furnace? Well, even though a lava bucket is the single best item, if you put in a full stack of coal blocks, it can smelt for over 14 hours straight, which is just over 42 full Minecraft days of smelting. That's more than 50 times better than a single lava bucket, but you would need 576 coal to do this, so better get fortune on your pickaxe. One of the key properties of Minecraft's water is that this stuff gets everywhere, and examples like this show as much. So to stop that, we usually use signs like so to cut off the source, which works for sure, but it's a bit obtrusive, to say the least. So to keep it simple and out of sight, glow lichen is a solid pick. See, besides just lighting up your stuff, this organism is good for blocking flowing water, letting us walk into our water base without a problem, or a distracting piece of wood on the side. And if you ask me, that's the best of both worlds, even if it's not the intended use. Most of the time, locking a chest in Minecraft is a luxury that only creative map makers have. That is, until you add our furry friends into the equation. By having your cat sit on top of a chest, it is impossible to open up the thing. And what's even better is that you can kinda hide this system by having a piston push a non-solid block on top of the chest. That way, if your friend's trying to open up your chest to steal your valuables, at least your feline companion's gonna keep it safe. They're not exactly ferocious lions by appearance, but sure enough, they still can do the job just alright. Back in the survival test for Java Edition, when you would mine gold ore, it would drop 1 to 3 golden blocks instead of golden ingots of the ore itself. And if only it still worked that way, huh? If you really need to keep your allays from dying, then your real get out of jail free card here is that if you give your allay a totem of undying, then they can use it just like we would. And there you go, you take them from hardcore mode right back into regular survival. Or if the allay's not the only mob they want to keep safe, then with the fox as well, you can do the same. But unfortunately, they're a little bit tougher to get the totem too, since for the fox you need to throw the totem onto the ground for it to be picked up. But once they have it, it doesn't matter what kind of polar bear gets nearby. They'll be left unscathed, and you'll have a very confused polar bear as well.
In 1.20, we got a new kind of wood block to use with the addition of bamboo blocks. Or at least most of those bamboo blocks we're able to use as wood. And strangely enough, the mosaic bamboo is the only wood that cannot be used in other recipes. And instead, all they're good for is fuel. I mean, I guess they're good for decorating too. I like using it in spaghetti like this one, that was showed in a build hack video in the past. But if you wanted to craft with it, it was useless. Which, that's pretty rough. Even the nether stems are able to use this way. But those also aren't able to be used as fuel, so maybe that's the trade-off.
By this point, we're all familiar with the trick to turn your animals upside down by using a dinner bone name tag. But in this update, that's been tweaked a bit. And now when you feed your flipped over friends, they'll look up at the food instead of down like they used to. Though, the sheep still don't work.
Well, I'm sure plenty of you are familiar with the Legacy Console Edition that was since
once abandoned for Minecraft consoles, it turns out that the actual shortest-lived version of Minecraft Console Edition existed exclusively on the new Nintendo 3DS system, since that version only lasted for 1 year, 4 months, and 3 days to the date. Or it did if you happen to live in North America and Japan, since if you lived in parts of Europe or Oceania, this version only lasted for 3 months and 27 days. But ever since January 15th of 2019, it received its final update, and it seems like Mojang and everyone else just wants to forget about it. But considering how many features weren't in the game, that might have been for the best. When they were first added in, shears were originally supposed to be used to defuse TNT, but it didn't make it into the final version, which I think is a shame. It would have been fun to carry around a pair of shears the next time they are doing TNT combat, but I guess a water bucket could do the job just as well, and for only 1 extra iron ingot. Keeping your stuff safe in Minecraft is a key problem, and to help with that, it's usually a good idea to lock down your door in some way. But since an item frame combination or a carrot key are fairly standard by this point, it's worth getting creative. And luckily, the axolotl is our ticket for this. See, much like a rabbit-based detection system, if we hold a bucket of tropical fish within range of the axolotl, it'll move towards the pressure plate and trigger the redstone, allowing us to walk in, and the axolotl will walk back to the water to reset itself. And it's a much friendlier alternative to a pufferfish player detector, that's for sure. We can make this TNT launcher over 3 times better with just this simple trick. See, the problem is that because of the damage that you take in survival mode, we never seem to launch as high as we do in creative. But this user has a perfect solution, since by simply attaching a dispenser full of arrows to shoot us before we launch off, then that little tick of damage is going to make sure that we launch sky high off of one of these things. And if you don't believe me, just look at the comparison. It's pretty jarring. But with either method, it's important to remember. It's great that we have a way to launch ourselves into the air, but you're going to need some way to safely land on the ground. Otherwise, it's a lot less impressive. If you compare the loading animation for a crossbow when you're in first person in Bedrock and in Java, you notice that the difference is that the Bedrock plays more to the side while the Java happens in the middle. Secret entrances in Minecraft are very cool to pull off, but most of the time, with redstone and such, they take a lot of work. So for a simpler option, you can build one using just this one block. Seriously, if you place down a shulker box with a block above your head, you can actually phase through the shulker box when you open it up to get sneakily into your base. To any onlookers, it looks like you just fell through solid ground, which I guess you did, making this even cooler. And it's definitely the new way I'm getting into my mines. If you have trouble fighting mobs at night, then you might want to brew up some weakness potions, since surprisingly so, these can render a lot of mobs completely useless. And you'll see as much if we use it on a zombie. They will still do their attack animation, however, you don't even receive a damage tick or a knockback when they do it. And folks, that's on hard difficulties. And it's not just zombies either, this will happen for slimes, spiders, and even silverfish. And perhaps my favorite yet, if you use a weakness potion on a cave spider, that'll prevent it from poisoning you too, which really makes these ankle biters seem a lot less intimidating when you use it like that. If we power this block with redstone, then this big drip leaf plant will never fall, which is admittedly very weird. It's what they're supposed to do. But sure enough, no matter how long we stand here, it'll never droop down. And interestingly so, if the big drip leaf was already drooping down, then by powering them on, they'll instantly go up to the locked position. And while this feature seems confusing, it's definitely intentional, given the fact that the drip leaf plant was included within the new Redstone Creative tab. While it definitely looks out of place there, this does give us some cool new options of using this as a new kind of trap door. Almost like a timed trap door, if you will. You wait for the mob to fall, and then bam, lock it right up to the upright position. And I know for one that there's technical geniuses in the Minecraft community who can think of things way better than I could with this. So we'll leave it to them to see how cool it can be. While raiding the new trial chambers that we're finding in this update, how do you tell which mobs are going to spawn from a different trial spawner? Well, I guess the easy answer would be wait until they start spawning, but you can actually go against that, since by looking at the floor design, you can see in this helpful graphic from Reddit, each one of these spawners has a different 4 blocks that are put into the base. And once you know how to look out for these, and particularly look out for the ones that are going to be in trouble, it can really help you out in a pinch. This may look like a doormat, and it is, but it also doubles as an effective way of keeping mobs out of your base. No joke, by just having this simple carpet laid out like so, we prevent most mobs from walking through 2 tall walkways. And since their pathfinding doesn't think that they can make it through, we can use this to keep certain mobs out or in a specific area that we want. And plus, having a couple of carpet pieces laying on your floor is a lot less distracting than having a fence or a guarded gate, meaning this works for both the form and the function. Silk Touch is a valuable enchantment to have. So valuable, in fact, that many of us don't want to waste it, which is why shears used to be so great. See, prior to 1.9, we could enchant shears with Silk Touch, and then use that enchantment elsewhere. Meaning, if you built with a lot of glass, put Silk Touch on your shears, and instead you've got an unbreakable glass remover, which was cool while it lasted. During development, the Evoker used to look pretty different, and we could see that from when Mojang did this Meet the Evoker article. The mob originally had a hat like so, but even though they removed this before release, it's interesting to note that it resembles the one that you see on the Illusioner mob. Though the Illusioner wasn't added officially either, so maybe Mojang just doesn't like hats. Here's why channeling is the most evil enchantment that you can use in Minecraft. If you were to put this on your trident and then kill one of your friends or foes, then on death, all of their items will be deleted from the inventory, which no doubt is devastating. So if you weren't able to trick your friend into putting Curse of Vanishing on their stuff, then I guess you could do this and essentially put Curse of Vanishing on their entire kit. If you've been in any fandom, you've definitely heard the word shipping come up before. And while that's its own can of worms, it seems like someone at LEGO agrees with you, since in the July and August issue of LEGO Club magazine in 2016, it was officially mentioned that Steve is Alex's boyfriend, which is cute, but only until you make the two of them fight. Since Minecraft's a game of cubes, of course everyone's gonna freak out when there's a new circle that's added into the game. And whether that's the shadows that we see underneath our feet, or the kind of command block trickery that's done by someone like Mysticat, there's now a new contender to throw into the ring. And as user Breakcheek shows off, by using the different orientations of the crafters, we're able to line up their textures just right and get ourselves a new circle inside of Minecraft. I mean, it kinda looks like a stovetop, and I think that's just lovely. Here's why Enderods are useful when they're horizontal, but not as much when they're vertical. Because when it's horizontal, you're able to drop falling blocks on top of it and it'll break them like so. Much the same way that a torch or slab would, but place it upright instead, and the falling blocks can fall right into place without ever breaking. Minecraft enchantments are a great thing, but they don't always make sense. And while it's weird to use a fire aspect book for lighting TNT, I think it's even stranger that we can put mending on a carrot on a stick. But if you've got the levels, I'm sure the pigs appreciate it, though I still can't get over the image of a regenerating carrot. With the changes in the Caves and Cliffs update, Minecraft's build height has needed to expand. And while that means that we can now place blocks much higher than we used to, one feature actually got even taller. Now, beacon beams are visible up to 1,343 blocks away from the source, as opposed to the 256 of the past. Using lapis lazuli to enchant seems expensive, but it used to be so much worse, since back in the day it would require 50 levels for a max level enchant. And folks, that's not just 50 levels to qualify, that's 50 levels for one enchantment. And even though that got bumped down to 30 levels in 1.3.1, it was eventually entirely reworked in 1.8 to where you just need 3 levels after you hit the 30 level enchant barrier. It's physically possible to explode a block of obsidian. Now obviously you couldn't do this with regular TNT, no matter how many you explode at once, but if you use this command to summon a prime piece of TNT with an explosion power of 72 or above, it'll be strong enough to destroy a piece of obsidian. This was the first armor ever added to Minecraft. When Mojang was testing out adding armor to the game, the first one that they added in was actually called plate armor. And while it looks pretty similar to iron armor, you wouldn't want to get them mixed up, since the plate armor unfortunately gave no protection when you wore it. And I've got to say, if you're testing out armor, I feel like maybe having the armor actually protect you would be one of the things that you'd want to try first, but maybe that's just me. What's the difference between this fence gate and this one that we have right here? Well, it's hard to notice, but when you place a fence gate next to a wall, it'll stoop down a little bit lower to match the height of the cobblestone wall. For so long in Minecraft history, water and rails have not mixed, which is why it's hard to believe that this rule finally changed in 1.17. Going forward, we're able to place our rails and carts right next to flowing water just fine. I can already see this opening up a bunch of new possibilities. In the past, we've sung the praises of using a boat to negate any fall damage that you might take in the nether, but there's a reason we didn't tell you to do this back in 2012. For one, the channel didn't exist, but also, back then if you were in a boat, you would still take all of the fall damage that you take from a fall. And it wasn't until 1.7.2 that this finally got fixed, and our boat MLGs started to work out a bit better. The reason that beds explode in the nether is because Notch was lazy. Well, that's an oversimplification, but he has gone on record saying that this is the easiest solution to whether or not the player should respawn in the other dimensions. And it's funny to think that just with that little decision, it made for an entirely new form of combat in the way of bed bombing. We've talked before that a splash potion of harming is a valuable asset to have, especially against armored foes. But even if it is strong, it's not exactly a one-hit kill, or at least it isn't with us. Though if you were to land a direct hit with a harming 2 potion on a cave spider, that's just enough to finish it off. But even with that trick, I'd rather just take out the spawner and be done with the whole thing. In Bedrock, it's possible to mine a furnace or an enchantment table without using a pickaxe, and the item will still drop, which is a bit confusing considering that they're made out of blocks that don't drop without a pickaxe anyway in either version. But I'm not complaining if it means I get to save the durability of my diamond pickaxe. Unless we're talking about the secret killer rabbit, the bunnies in Minecraft are nothing to be afraid of, though someone at Mojang disagrees. Because when Ravagers were tested in Snapshot 18W43A, these pillager monsters were afraid of rabbits, which is a fun Easter egg, but unfortunately, Jeb confirmed in a tweet that it was removed to maintain the beast's lore. In Java, a spider jockey looks like this. But on Bedrock Edition, we have a whole bunch of other jockeys to choose from. In fact, there's up to 12 different variants in this version alone, which is a lot more terrifying. From version 1.8 to 1.13 of Minecraft, there existed a special option in the world building settings. Or should I say options, because when you clicked on this custom world builder menu, it allowed you to customize a whole bunch about your Minecraft world. Like the ability to change the sea level, the dungeon count, whether you had villages or not, and a whole bunch more. It makes a lot of sense for a sandbox game. Honestly, I'm surprised that it's been cut out entirely. But seeing the kind of horrors that you can generate with this world type, maybe that's for the best. This here is called Invisible Bedrock. And if you can't see what I'm talking about, that's kind of the point. Now, this behaves much like the barrier block, except it's exclusive to the Bedrock edition of Minecraft. And it was originally used in the game to create these world boundaries around old worlds. But those world boundaries didn't go past build height, so if you just built up high enough, you can walk over it.
It's no secret that lava's the water of the nether. Or I guess with glitches, water's the water of the nether, but at least the intended way, lava flows about the same speed that water does in the overworld. But it's only recently that lava's been changed to push entities when it's flowing, and that's allowed for much better nether farms that we can see here. In the past, a blaze farm would have to look like this mess with a bunch of pressure plates and pistons. Now you just add in some lava, it's a lot cleaner, and it makes more visual sense too.
Baby piglins are an annoying mob for sure, and while that's true in all versions, it seems particularly apparent in the Bedrock edition. Over here, we can equip the toddlers with a full set of armor and a sword, and that turns these bratty kids into something a lot more sinister. But if you try this, just don't give them a gold sword, otherwise they'll pocket that like any other ingot. The bad omen effect is not something I'd recommend getting often, but when you do, pay attention to how it happens, because while it functions like any other effect in Java, in Bedrock it'll have an animation similar to the Totem of Undying. Along with the changes to the Nether, Soul Sand also got a much cooler, more laid-back cousin, because whether you're using it for a basalt generator or soul campfires, soul soil just generally seems like less of a burden. But the question is, can it spawn withers? And as you can see, it works just the same, making this an even better replacement for the sand of the past. Now, why is this quartz block better than this one? Well, by default, quartz blocks have a low blast resistance. But if you were to use 2 quartz slabs or a smooth quartz block instead, you can make a substantially stronger 4th than the alternative, all without sacrificing the look of the regular quartz. One of the big changes for Minecraft going forward is parity between how Java and Bedrock generate. So as the 2 versions get closer and closer, our enchantment tables are doing the same. And now, enchantment tables in the Java version give off a light level of 7, just enough to light up the 15 bookshelves nearby. If you watch closely, this squid's arms will start to move slower and slower. And why this happens is because, in Bedrock only, a squid's arms show how much oxygen it has left. So when 15 seconds pass and it's out of air in the tank, its arms will stop and it'll suffocate, which seems like a lot of effort to code for such a pointless mob. Would you believe me if I told you that striders were fish? Well, looking at one now, that's a hard comparison to justify. Though that might have changed during development. See, if we check the strider's texture file prior to snapshot 20W15A, they actually had a fin in the texture data. But since that update, the original file has been removed. Drowned are famous for prowling around the various rivers that we've got on the surface, but you're less likely to see some of these in the caves below. At least, you wouldn't until now. But with the addition of aquifers next to dripstone caves, these mobs can now spawn in the underground, giving their zombie cousins a bit of competition. Diamonds are the quintessential rare item in Minecraft's overworld, but for a time, there was something even rarer. See, when they were added, cocoa beans weren't exactly renewable, meaning the only ones you could get were from a lucky exploration trip. And that, folks, meant that they existed on a smaller part of the map than the diamond ore. So I hope those cookies I made were worth it.
When a player gets hit in Minecraft, they turn red. That's something that's been consistent all the way through. But prior to 1.8, if you wore armor as well, then that armor would also take that red shader on top of it. But nowadays, it doesn't nearly hurt as bad, and we're the only ones who have to suffer from a punch.
Enderman and water don't mix. Then it makes sense that since 1.11, they'll take 1 hit point of damage when they're hit by a splash bottle of water. It's a well-established rule. You can't sleep when monsters are nearby. But while that's not changing anytime soon, Mojang has added one small bit to lighten the load. You see, even though you can advance to morning when a zombie is next door, you're still able to set your spawn point the same, which is nice because if I'm stuck here, I'd at least want a safety net to keep on hand. Even though the only way to craft a lodestone is to use a netherite ingot, unfortunately this expensive block isn't immune to fire or lava the same way that netherite is. It's not even like just the stone burns off and you get the netherite ingot back. The whole thing disappears, which could be quite the tragedy if you were to drop one of these in the nether. Alright, pop quiz. What mob is this? I'll give you a hint, it's not a silverfish. Actually, it's just an endermite. See, when the endermite was added in, it was just a purple version of the silverfish, before it eventually got this new smaller model that we see today. In vanilla Minecraft, it's entirely possible to have a candle that's lit on fire, even when it's underwater. And with the NBT tags like so, we can summon in that candle. Or if you're in Java, just use a debug stick like so. In the past, if a creeper was about to explode, then any mobs within a certain range would turn and run away from the creeper. Which seems like it makes sense, right? Self-preservation and all that. But the real reason this feature was eventually removed was because it caused causes an immense amount of lag. Sure, it seems simple to have a mob run away when a creeper's about to explode, but to do that, Mojang had it where the mobs were constantly checking to see if there's an exploding creeper nearby. And when every mob that's loaded into the game is trying to do that all at once every single tick, it's no surprise that you got a lot of lag. And as cool as this feature would have been, it's never seen the light of day since. With so many blocks to choose from, Minecraft is bound to have a few repeats. And while it's to be expected, it makes it all the more impressive when Mojang hides those variants. Take the jungle log for instance. As such, it doesn't look too much like the standard oak selection, but if we flip our oak log to its side, then it's a bit more jarring. See, what's happening here is that the jungle log is actually a color shift of the sideways oak texture, even having the same details when you overlap them, which I'll admit is pretty cool since I always thought their similarities stopped and started with the planks texture. But even if they do match, that color combination is still hideous. Before archaeology got added in 1.20, it had been teased for 3 years prior to its initial release, and it looks like one of the things that Mojang couldn't decide on was how this brush was supposed to look, since it's had 3 different looks since it was initially released. This one with both a copper and an oxidized handle, this one that looked more like a paintbrush, and finally, the design that we've seen today. And honestly, I'm glad that we don't have to worry about another thing oxidizing for our copper. I don't exactly want to get struck by lightning while I'm holding one of these things. I trapped 70 wardens in this one area, and the reason is that with all these wardens, no other hostile mobs are going to spawn around us. See, the hostile spawn in Minecraft works off something called a mob cap, which is that after a certain amount of hostile mobs are spawned, the game isn't going to spawn anymore, which means that if we get ourselves enough wardens and then use a note block so that they don't despawn, then we're technically still safe, but nowhere else in the server are more hostile mobs going to spawn. And after you build this, I'd recommend placing a chunk loader and getting immediately out of there, because having 70 wardens in one spot is going to mean 70 mobs that are trying to give you the darkness effect, which if you ask me is 70 too many. While the invisibility potion effect makes you almost entirely invisible to different mobs and players, as it turns out there's something in Minecraft a little bit more all-knowing. As you can see, if you have the invisibility effect and then you walk up to an enchanting table, then it'll still open up and the book will see the player. By building a structure made out of gold blocks, cobblestone, and a nether reactor core, you could build yourself the so-called nether reactor, which was a feature that only exists in old versions of Bedrock Minecraft. And once you went through all those steps of building it, then what would happen is that you'd get this message telling you it was active before it generated this massive structure of netherrack around it called the Nether Spire. And in a version of the game where you couldn't go into the nether dimension actually, this was a solid substitute. But as soon as there was an actual way to go into the nether dimension, there wasn't really a point for this, and it's been lost to time. As Weefies demonstrates in this video, if you were to place blocks at the exact right height while you're falling, then you can actually trick the game into not registering any fall damage when you land. Now, the reason that this happens is that the game thinks that we're stepping onto the blocks instead of just falling onto them. And you wouldn't take fall damage if you were just stepping onto any regular block down here in the overworld, so nothing happens. But before you go get excited to try and learn this skill, I will warn, it doesn't work in newer versions. I have a feeling if you tried it, it'd be a rude awakening even if you could get the timing down. Alright, pop quiz. Have you ever heard of the Minecraft mob, the Spark? If you haven't, then you probably haven't looked at the game's files, considering that only there's the Shulker's bullet called the Spark. But other than that, how would you even know this? It's not like it spawns with a name tag or anything, but there you go. Now you got something for your next Minecraft trivia night. There are plenty of hidden gems to see just by messing around with Minecraft's NBT data. But with the Caves and Cliffs update, there's even a new fun sight to see. Now, slimes can be summoned with a maximum size of 128, allowing for some disturbingly huge mobs to roam your world. And all I can say is this, thank God they don't spawn in survival. Tracking down the chiseled stone bricks isn't their only annoyance, since due to the fact that Minecraft textures are 16 by 16, this pattern was bound to have some asymmetry, and that would be why the center of this block isn't actually in the center. And this is one of those where I'm afraid once you see it, you won't be able to unsee it. And unfortunately, a cobblestone wall like this doesn't make it any easier to look at. If you're trying to hide your stuff, you should put it in a barrel instead of a chest. And the reason for that is because barrels are rendered like regular blocks, they're not going to be visible if someone were to use an X-ray glitch. And this original post proves as much. You can definitely tell that there's something hidden underneath the dirt, whereas the barrel, not as much. Skeleton horses are a weird feature in Minecraft. Sure, they look awesome, but they're so slow and hard to get that they often work better as a trophy than a utility. That is, until Mojang started working on the aquatic side. No joke, what these lack on land, they actually make up for by being able to ride a skeleton horse underwater, which is just great. This trick will help you find buried treasure every single time, because instead of trying to guess where the X means on the map, if you instead line yourself up and then use the F3 debug screen to move to where the chunk info line has a 9 in the first and third spots, then if you dig straight down, you'll be right on top of the chest, which is particularly useful if the chest happens to spawn out in the water next to the shoreline, because digging around aimlessly is already a time waster. We don't need to make that any worse by having to dig slower underwater. By this point, everyone's familiar with the rarest mob in Minecraft, but this mob can also be very rare, considering that there's only a rare chance that an Arctic fox even spawns in a snowy taiga biome, and then add on to that another 5% chance of that fox being a baby variant, and it gets to the point where if you find one of these, buy a lottery ticket. Your luck's pretty good. When you toggle a piston between on and off rapidly with a gravity-affected block such as sand on top of it, then eventually the piston will actually break the block, which, there you go, can even be picked up as an item. Is it practical? Not exactly. You're way better using a slab or something. Who doesn't love roller coasters? No one I want to hang around with, that's for sure. And it's because of this mutual love of roller coasters that I'm sure we've all tried to set up a throw ride once or twice. But the real test is what your friends think. Though it's pretty boring to just set them off and wait till they get back. So, to make that journey a bit more inclusive, why not upgrade your ride? You see, since minecarts can pick up entities, and boats happen to be entities, you can essentially make a two-person cedar minecart to ride the rails. So not only do you get a goofy ride to go around in, but you can also build up some surprising propulsion by rowing the boat, which I think we all can agree are pretty great things. This is the rarest structure in Minecraft, and not just because it doesn't exist anymore, but even when they existed in the game, these giant brick pyramids were rarer than woodland mansions are today, though you would have only found them during the in-dev phase of Minecraft, which alone is tough enough to boot up that version, but lucky for us, they did have a specific location that they spawned in, so as soon as you found one, you were still able to share with your friends. Did you know that the squids used to be stronger? Well, sure enough, if you would get one beached on land, in the past, they wouldn't suffocate, and in fact, they weren't given the ability to do so until the 1.4.4 release, proving that even in the past, Mojang barely cared about this pointless mob. Alright, pop quiz. Which one of these is coal, and which one is charcoal? Well, when it was first added in, it was nearly impossible to tell the difference, considering that charcoal had the same texture as coal, and it wasn't until a few updates later that charcoal would get its own texture like this. But really, they both burn for the same amount of time and they have the same use, so there wasn't much of a drawback for getting them confused. Although I guess it would have been confusing to try and stack both of these together in a chest. Usually, when you see a skeleton, your first instinct is for fight or flight, but if you stop and look them over, you'll see this. In Java Edition, 89% of skeletons are right-handed, and the remaining 11% hold a bow in their left, and this emulates the estimated right-handed to left-handed percentage in the real world, and thankfully there aren't any ambidextrous skeletons in the game. If you're able to get up close and personal to a camel's nose, you'll notice that when you look at it dead on, it actually seems to match the texture of a wither skull, which with Minecraft's resolution, it's tough to tell if this was intentional or just about the only way that you could make a camel's nose look right. But intentional or not, it's still a fun Easter egg. Nowadays, thanks to hardcore Minecraft, the Totem of Undying texture is iconic. It kinda has to be when everyone's holding in their secondary slot, which makes me even more thankful that it isn't the totem texture that we originally had, since back in Snapshot 16W39A, the Totem of Undying was originally supposed to be added to 1.11 looking like this, which more resembles a peeled banana than actually a villager. And honestly, I'd rather carry around a totem that looks like Sandiction in my hotbar, but I might have just wanted to do that anyways. In the past, if you emptied a water bucket inside of a cauldron, there was no way to remove it, and the only way to get the water out of the cauldron was to break the cauldron and replace it, since using water bottles or an empty bucket couldn't do anything on it, which makes it seem like cauldrons have been useless for a whole long time. And maybe it's true that they're more useful for lava these days than they've ever been for water. Here's how to smelt your logs into charcoal without ever needing a furnace. Since if you were to go into a crafting table and put those 3 logs towards a campfire, then once you place down that campfire and break it, you'll be left with anywhere from 2 to 4 pieces of charcoal. And sure, it does take 1 piece of charcoal to get the whole thing rolling, but it's hard to say this isn't a whole lot faster. And once you've done this trick once, you'll have enough charcoal left over to keep doing it again and again. In the past, we used to use TNT for our player cannons, but ever since 1.21, we're now able to follow after Michael23B's design and make one of the easiest player cannons using wind charges. As we can see in this example, in almost no time, they travel nearly 60 blocks just to land perfectly at the top and take no fall damage from it. I mean, with TNT player cannons, sure, you can reduce the amount of damage that you take with things like blast protection, but even then, there's some damage sustained. But because of the way that wind charges work, there's absolutely none sustained here. And with redstone that's so simple you could learn how to do it from just a screenshot, there's no reason not to build this in your next base. Before we got the update Aquatic in 1.13, the ocean biome looked extremely dark. And in fact, even if you placed glowstone down there, that would only light up about 5 blocks around it. But nowadays, we've got things like sea lanterns and coral reefs to finally light up the abyss, which is nice, but that update also added in the drowned mobs, so you get what you get, I guess. In the future, we'll be able to stack potions like this, or at least that's the idea behind this combat test snapshot. Since to completely rework how PvP's done in Minecraft, Mojang's working on the idea that we'd be able to stack up the same potion to a stack of 16, which is a big change for inventory management considering that holding 16 potions currently looks like this. Not exactly easy to pack. If you don't have the extra materials to make a sign or an item frame, then it is possible to name your chest in this way, since any container item will retain their name name in the UI screen if you were to name them in an anvil. And considering that you can name a whole stack of these at once, it could be pretty cheap overall. At the very least, it's just an easy way to sneak in a funny message for your friend and wonder if they'll ever notice it. If you've ever tried to get a skeleton to hit a creeper, then you know it's not an easy task, but it's a necessary one if we want to fill out our music disc collection, so we'll have to get creative. And luckily, this user has the right idea. See, Minecraft counts assists the same way that it does kills, meaning if we have a skeleton shoot a piece of TNT, ignite it, and then that kills the creeper, we'll get the music disc the same way. Simple as that. This is Minecraft Steve. Nothing new, right? And this is 100 Minecraft Steves. Maybe that's a little weirder. But back in the first version of Minecraft Classic, it was possible that if you pressed the G key on your keyboard, you could create an infinite number of Steves running around your world. And running around your world is a bit of an understatement for what they're doing. They would just flail around, oddly moving their limbs place to place. And nowadays, the G key has no functionality, and you can't summon Steves at all. So this is definitely an extinct feature.
With the ways that the crafter block lights up when you power it, we're able to incorporate it into our walls and floors, and take after this user's example to have a chasing light effect that goes through your industrial builds. And now this is starting to look like something that you'd get in a mod pack, let alone in vanilla Minecraft. And while that might turn away certain players, I think it looks pretty nice here. And for showing players where to go inside of your map, this is a really cool way to do it. If not gonna take a little bit of redstone and upfront cost to craft all these.
And with that, folks, YouTube thinks that you might like this video, so see if they're right and have a good one, alright?